My parents bought my sister a house. I got nothing until the lottery ticket I meant to give them hit. My name is Julia Fox. I'm 35 years old, a senior software engineer living in Seattle. I've worked in tech since I was 23, starting from the bottom like everyone else, debugging other people's bad code until someone noticed I could write my own. Most people think I'm the definition of stability condo in Capitol Hill, a dog named Ajax, decent benefits, no wild debt. But if you looked a little closer, you'd see something quieter, a daughter who kept showing up, a sister who kept being forgotten, a woman who learned early that if you weren't dramatic or dependent, you disappeared. I've never asked my parents for anything, not when I had to take out loans to finish school, not when I had to get surgery for a torn ligament and couldn't work for 6 weeks, not even when I lost my first job in a wave of layoffs and had to freelance to pay rent. Somehow, in their eyes, that made me the one who didn't need anything at all. My sister Vanessa is 3 years younger than me. She's beautiful in the effortless way that people get called artsy just for existing. Vanessa dropped out of 2 different programs before settling into what she called freelance design, which mostly meant borrowing money from our parents while posting mood boards and brunch pictures online. She called herself a creative in flux. And my mother, Carla, said that meant she hadn't found her direction yet. Our father, Dennis, retired now but once a structural engineer, just nodded along to everything Mom said. That's been the dynamic forever. Vanessa was the butterfly, fluttering from dream to dream, and I was the one no one had to worry about. This year, for my 35th birthday, I told myself I didn't expect anything. I had a plan to spend it quietly, maybe go to Bainbridge for the weekend, walk the beach with Ajax, and read something that didn't involve system migrations or stakeholder reports. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I just wanted peace. But a week before my birthday, my mother called and said they wanted to do a simple dinner at home. Her exact words were nothing fancy, just us, and for some reason, that made something in me soften. I bought a bottle of wine they used to love, picked out some sea salt caramels from a local chocolatier, and even wrote a card. I added a lottery ticket too, something I did every year as a joke, something that made them laugh. This year, I almost forgot to buy it. The machine at the grocery store wasn't working, and I stood there for a few seconds, thinking maybe I'd skip it, but then I didn't. I got the ticket. I slid it inside the card with a quick scribble. Maybe this year we hit the jackpot. When I arrived at their house in the suburbs, everything looked the same. The porch light was on. The smell of garlic bread leaked out from under the door. Vanessa's car was already in the driveway, her designer bag slung across the front seat like a prop. Inside, the dining table was set like a photo from a magazine. White plates, folded napkins, fresh flowers. My mother was bustling around the kitchen, pulling a lasagna out of the oven. "You made my favorite," I said with a small smile. "Did I?" she replied absently. "Oh, right. I guess I did." I stood there holding the gift bag while she waved a hand toward the living room. "Go sit with your sister. We're almost ready." Vanessa was curled on the couch, scrolling her phone. She looked up briefly, nodded, and said, "Hey, Jules." She hadn't called me that in years. I asked if she was doing okay. She smiled. "Better than okay. I have news." I waited for her to say more, but my father walked in then, carrying a file folder, and said, "Well, we may as well tell her now." I didn't even get to sit down. Vanessa beamed. "They bought me a condo. It's right by the lake top floor, 2 balconies, and the building has a rooftop garden." I blinked. "You what?" My mother chimed in. We thought it was time. Vanessa needs stability, and this was a good investment. The seller needed to move quickly, so we made a cash offer. I tried to keep my face still. Cash, I repeated. My father nodded. $820,000. But we've been saving for a while. I looked around. The celebration wasn't for me. It never had been. There were no candles, no cake, not even a card, just my parents, beaming at the child who had never worked a steady job for more than 6 months. I was still holding the gift bag when I excused myself to the hallway bathroom. Inside, under that pale yellow lighting, I looked at the envelope in my hand. I pulled out the card, quietly slipped the lottery ticket back into my coat pocket, and left the caramels in the bag. They'd never know it was missing. And in that moment, it felt like the first thing I'd kept for myself in years. I sat in the bathroom longer than I should have, staring at my own reflection, wondering how I had let myself hope. There wasn't even a candle in the kitchen, not a joke card, not a glance in my direction that held any warmth. 35 years old, and I still believed maybe they'd remember. Maybe this year would be different. But if I was being honest, that kind of hope didn't begin this year. It began when I was 7, when Vanessa got a magician for her birthday, and I got a pair of new sneakers and a quiet, "Be grateful." Honey, I remember standing at the edge of the living room during her party, holding a paper cup of orange soda, trying not to cry because I knew if I did, they'd say I was making a scene. My mother used to say I was too serious even as a child. I read books instead of playing dress-up. I asked questions she didn't want to answer. I cleaned up without being told. In 3rd grade, when I won a citywide science award, my dad said, "That's great," and changed the subject to Vanessa's school play, where she had a non-speaking role as a tree. By the time I reached high school, I had learned to stop sharing. When I got into the University of Washington's computer science program on partial scholarship, they congratulated me over dinner at Applebee's. When Vanessa switched majors for the 3rd time and cried because her roommate moved out, my parents drove 3 hours in the middle of the night to comfort her. I tried to tell myself it wasn't favoritism, just different parenting styles for different children. But the truth is, I never needed a magician or middle-of-the-night drives. I just wanted to be seen. Even as an adult, I kept showing up. I visited on weekends, brought Ajax when my mom was feeling down, helped my dad update his old tax software every spring. Vanessa missed birthdays, forgot anniversaries, bailed on plans, but she always had a reason, always a soft cushion beneath her. She's still figuring it out. They'd say, she just needs more time. Meanwhile, I was the one with the job, the 401k, the emergency fund, and the increasingly visible burnouts that no one seemed to notice. The weight of being the capable one is quiet. No one checks in on the one they assume is fine. My therapist once called it functional invisibility. I called it being Julia, even in tech, where I'd made a name for myself as someone who could untangle legacy code like a puzzle. I'd watched others get promoted faster. I was told I lacked executive presence, a phrase that mostly meant I didn't network at the right bars or laugh loud enough at VP jokes. So I worked harder. I kept a digital folder of every successful deployment I led. Every late-night bug fix I handled alone. I thought if I had enough proof, one day, someone would finally say, "You've done enough." But no one ever does. After the dinner that wasn't a birthday, I drove back to my apartment in silence. The card with the missing ticket still in the bag they'd barely glanced at. I placed it on the kitchen counter without opening it. Ajax came to greet me, tail wagging. The only living thing in my life that never made me prove my worth. I gave him a treat and sat on the couch in the dark, not even bothering to turn on the lights. That night, sleep came in fragments. My brain kept looping through their voices at the table. Vanessa needs stability. We've been saving for this. It was a good investment. They never said it about me, not once. By morning, I felt the kind of tired that goes deeper than physical fatigue. I showered out of habit, made coffee I didn't drink, opened my laptop to check Jira tickets I couldn't process. My project manager had messaged the night before about a new feature rollout, but I barely read the update for the first time in years. I closed the laptop and left it on the desk. I didn't want to fix anything. I didn't want to prove anything. I just wanted silence. And in that silence, I remembered the ticket. Not the one in the envelope, the other one, the one I had slipped into the inner pocket of my coat when I left the bathroom. A random choice, just a joke, a weekly habit born out of quiet sarcasm. Every Friday, I'd buy one. I never won. I never expected to. But last Friday, I had picked two, one for the gift, one for me. And now, one of them was still in my coat pocket. I didn't check it, not yet. That would come later. For now, all I knew was that this birthday had finally broken something in me that I'd spent decades pretending didn't hurt. The day after the dinner, my mother sent a photo to the family group chat. It was Vanessa, standing in front of a sleek glass building with the kind of lighting that made it look like a luxury hotel. She wore a long beige coat, hair curled, holding out the condo keys with one hand and flashing a perfect smile. The caption was simple, officially hers. My father added a string of clapping emojis, and Vanessa replied with, "Couldn't have done it without you guys. No one tagged me. No one asked if I had gotten home safely the night before. No one mentioned that it had been my birthday." I stared at the image for a full minute before muting the chat entirely. I didn't leave. I didn't start a fight. I just stepped away silently like I always did. But this time, it wasn't numbness. It was clarity. I opened my budgeting app later that morning, half out of habit. Rent was due in a week. My dog's vet bill was pending, and I still hadn't heard back about whether my position would be affected by the upcoming restructuring at work. There was a general tension in the engineering department, whispers of contract merging, offshore pivot, and headcount optimization had been floating around for weeks. My manager had been unusually silent, which, in our world, usually meant someone was preparing an HR safe statement. Most of us had started backing up our portfolios and contacts. I had spent years building internal tools no one wanted to fund, only to have a team of junior hires repackage them for new clients under a different label. That week, I didn't even open my dashboard. It wasn't just the money. I wasn't jealous of Vanessa's new condo, though I won't pretend I didn't calculate the cost. $820,000, all in cash, in one of Seattle's most expensive zip codes. That's not just a gift. That's a message. That's someone saying, you deserve security, even if you haven't earned it. I kept thinking back to all the times I'd been told, you'll be fine, you always are, as if being resilient was a reward in itself, as if I hadn't worked for every inch of ground I stood on. Vanessa had missed more rent payments in a year than I had in my entire adult life, yet she now had a rooftop view and marble countertops while I debated whether to switch to cheaper dog food for Ajax. Later that week, I ran into Michael during a late grocery run. We had worked together years ago at an early-stage startup and stayed friends through job changes and relationship detours. He noticed something was off right away. I hadn't even told him about the birthday dinner. We ended up sitting in my car for over an hour, parking lot lights flickering above us. As I told him everything, no card, no cake, Just a condo for Vanessa and a quiet dismissal for me. You know what hurts the most, I said. It's not the money. It's that they didn't even notice I was sitting right there when they made that announcement. They didn't stop to think what that would feel like. It's like I was just background. Michael didn't give me a pep talk or tell me to confront them. He just listened, which was more than anyone else had done that week. Before we parted, I mentioned the lottery ticket. I told him about how I'd planned to give it to my parents as a small joke, tucked in the envelope with the caramels. But I took it back. I said, not because I thought it would win, just because I didn't want to give them one more thing, even something meaningless. He nodded like he understood something unspoken. You ever check it? He asked. I shook my head. I forgot about it until just now. That night, I lay in bed with Ajax curled against my leg and stared at the ceiling, thinking about all the things I had quietly given away over the years. My time, my presence, my restraint, my patience. I had shown up for every birthday, every moving day, every hospital visit, and tech support request. I had paid for dinner when my father's card declined once, and I never told anyone. I had fixed their Wi-Fi in the middle of a client deadline. I had let Vanessa borrow my car when hers was booted, and I never even asked what she did with the parking tickets. I did it because I thought that one day it would add up to something, that they would look at the total and say, she matters too. But they never did. So when I finally got up and reached for my coat, it wasn't hope that moved me. It was the simple need to know whether the thing I had almost given away, just like everything else, might actually be the one thing I had kept. I found the ticket in the pocket of my navy coat, tucked behind a gas receipt and a folded grocery list. The edges were soft from friction, slightly curled, as if the paper itself had been holding its breath. I held it between my fingers for a moment before setting it gently on the kitchen table. Ajax looked up from his bed, tail thumping once, then went back to sleep. It was a little past midnight, and the only light in the apartment came from the microwave clock. I opened my laptop slowly, half expecting the lottery website to be down or glitchy. The numbers from that Friday's draw were still there, bright and bold in a banner at the top. I compared them one by one. First number matched. Second. Third. I paused. My throat dried. I double-checked. Fourth. Fifth. Sixth. All 6 numbers. I sat completely still, unsure if my body had just forgotten how to move. I looked again. There was no mistake. The verification tool blinked once, then returned a message I never imagined I would see in my own browser. Congratulations. You have a confirmed jackpot-winning ticket. The air around me felt heavier, like time had paused and was waiting for me to catch up. I wasn't screaming or crying. I wasn't even smiling. I was just staring at the screen like I had seen something forbidden. A part of me thought maybe it was a prank, or maybe I had clicked the wrong date. But it was all there. The date matched. The numbers matched. The ticket was real. $14.7 million before taxes. A little over 8.5 after. Enough to pay off every bill I had ever worried about. Enough to buy a condo next to Vanessa's in cash and never speak to my parents again. Enough to start over or disappear. But all I could think about in that moment was how close I had come to giving it away. If they had remembered my birthday, if they had said one kind word or lit a candle or even asked how I was doing, that ticket would have stayed in the envelope. They would have opened it, laughed, maybe tucked it on the fridge with a magnet. They would have scratched it or forgotten it or, if they were lucky, checked it in time, and it would have been theirs. I would have handed them $14 million wrapped in gold foil and a polite birthday card. I would still be sitting in this apartment with flickering kitchen lights and chipped baseboards and no answers from HR. I didn't know what to do next. I thought about calling Michael, but it was almost 1 a.m. Instead, I texted, "I need you to come by first thing tomorrow. I need you to see something." Then I turned off my phone and placed the ticket inside a hardcover book on my shelf, one I hadn't touched since college. I didn't sleep. Not really. I laid in bed, listening to the creaks of the building and the occasional car on the street below, holding the weight of possibility like a second heartbeat. By morning, the world looked the same, but I didn't. Michael arrived wearing a coffee-stained hoodie and no jacket, still blinking from sleep. I handed him the ticket without explanation. "Just read it." Then opened that laptop. He looked at me like I'd lost it, but he did what I asked. It took him less than 30 seconds to go completely silent. Then he said the words out loud, "Julia, this is the winning ticket." We stood there, both stunned, like we were watching it happen to someone else. I whispered. I almost gave it to them. Michael didn't laugh. He just shook his head slowly. Not this time. What came next wasn't excitement. It was logistics. We looked up everything. How to sign the ticket, when to go to the lottery office, whether to claim publicly or anonymously, what to say, what not to say. We made lists and backup copies and decided who to call first. He insisted I see a lawyer and a financial advisor before making a move. I agreed without argument. I wasn't in a rush. For the first time in years. I didn't feel pressure to fix everything overnight. I just wanted to do this carefully, deliberately, not because of the money, but because it was the first thing I had that was truly mine. That afternoon, I walked Ajax through the park, and no one had any idea that I was holding a secret that could rewrite my entire life. A mom pushed a stroller past me. A runner nodded politely. The city moved forward like it always did. And I moved with it, carrying something quiet, something sharp, something that had nothing to do with luck and everything to do with the decision I had made in that bathroom on the night my family forgot my birthday. The press release went out on a Thursday morning, just as the Lottery Commission had told me it would. No dramatic fanfare, no camera crews outside my building, just a quiet update on their official website listing my name, the prize amount, and the date of the win. That was all it took, by lunchtime. My inbox was flooded with messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years. An old college roommate wanted to reconnect. A distant cousin asked how I was feeling. My former boss, who once told me I was technically brilliant but emotionally flat, emailed to say he always believed I'd do something extraordinary. Everyone, it seemed, had something kind to say once there was money attached. But what I hadn't fully prepared for was how quickly my family would reappear, not with cake or apologies, but with curiosity disguised as casual concern. My mother called first, leaving a voicemail that started with, "Hey, sweetheart," just checking in, then pivoted into a list of Thanksgiving logistics and ended with a comment about how nice it must be to have a little financial breathing room. She didn't mention the birthday. She didn't mention the dinner, just decorations and sweet potato casserole and whether Vanessa's boyfriend could stay overnight. I didn't respond. A day later, my sister texted, "Hey, random question. Do you know any good contractors for bathroom remodels? The tile guy flaked and I'm over budget. Love you." No greeting, no small talk, no acknowledgement that my life had changed in a very public, very permanent way. Just a request dressed in familiar entitlement. I let the message sit unread for a few hours before deleting it. It felt strangely liberating, not cruel, like I had finally stopped performing in a play that never needed my role. Michael, who had insisted I take a leave of absence from work, came over that night with takeout and a bottle of wine. We sat on my balcony, watching the streetlights flicker on one by one. As I told him about the flood of messages and the tightness in my chest that wouldn't go away, I thought I'd feel powerful. I admitted, but mostly, I feel like prey. He nodded slowly, then leaned back in the chair, because they all want something now, and before. They didn't want anything from you. They just didn't want you. That wasn't bitterness in his voice. It was fact, simple and sharp like cold glass. And I couldn't argue with it. The next morning, my father called. He rarely called even when things were fine. His message was short. We should talk. Call me. No warmth, no clarity. Just a tone that said he expected me to fall back into the old rhythm. I didn't. I went for a run instead, pushing my legs harder than usual, letting the cold air scrape through my lungs until I felt something real. When I got home, I found another message from my mother, this one slightly more urgent. Your silence is worrying us. We understand you're going through a lot, but don't shut us out. Emma is very upset. Please, let's talk. I stared at the screen and laughed for the first time in days. Emma was upset. Emma, the woman with the condo, the girl with the life jacket sewn from our parents' attention and bank accounts. She was upset because I hadn't answered her tile question, not because she had remembered my birthday or because she had said something kind. It was like being blamed for stepping out of a photograph they'd been posing in for years without me. 1 week later, I agreed to meet them. Not because I was ready to reconnect, but because I needed to hear the words come out of their mouths. I needed to see if they even knew what they had done. We chose Saturday afternoon. My mother offered to cook, but I asked to meet at a neutral location instead, a cafe near the Arboretum, quiet and clean, where we couldn't raise our voices or fall into old habits. When I arrived, they were already seated. My father stood as I approached, but my mother stayed seated, her hands clasped too tightly in her lap. They asked about the lottery. I kept my answers brief. I didn't bring up the dinner. I waited. Finally, I asked, "Did either of you realize you forgot my birthday?" My mother blinked, then let out a soft gasp. My father looked down at the table. No one said yes. No one said no. They just let the silence settle between us. That told me everything I needed to know. The silence after I asked about my birthday stretched longer than anything I'd expected. My mother cleared her throat, eyes flicking to the window like the right answer might be written on the trees outside. My father finally spoke. It wasn't intentional. We were just focused on the condo. It was a lot to handle. He said it without guilt, without irony, as if the act of giving my sister a luxury home was so overwhelming that forgetting the birthday of their other daughter was a logistical casualty. My mother added quickly, "We meant to celebrate later, once things settled down. You know how chaotic it was. But I didn't know. I hadn't been included in the chaos. I'd only been present as a quiet observer, standing beside a celebration I had never been invited to. And I had grown tired of translating their neglect into excuses. I was there, I said, calmly. I was at the table, holding a gift bag, sitting next to Vanessa while she showed off the floor plan. And neither of you said my name once. My mother opened her mouth, then closed it again. My father shifted in his seat, looking suddenly older. "We've always admired your independence. Julia," he said, "you've always been the strong one, the one we didn't have to worry about." I nodded slowly. "That's what you tell yourselves, that I didn't need anything. But what I needed wasn't money or attention. I needed to matter. They didn't argue. That surprised me. I think some part of them knew, maybe had known all along, but the convenience of ignoring it had always outweighed the discomfort of facing it. I wasn't here to make them squirm. I didn't want revenge or a dramatic apology. I just wanted to stop pretending. I pulled a folded sheet of paper from my coat. This is a list of organizations I'm donating to. I said, it's part of what I'm doing with the money. I've also set up a small foundation that will provide scholarships to young women in tech, girls like me who were told to work hard and stay quiet. My mother's hand moved slightly toward the list, but I didn't hand it to her. I'm not sharing this for your approval. I said, I just need you to understand that the life I'm building now has nothing to do with what you think I deserve, and it certainly has nothing to do with Vanessa's mold problem. That got a reaction. My father blinked. My mother looked down. She told you, she asked softly. She texted me asking for $10,000. I replied. She didn't mention my birthday, didn't ask how I was, just said she couldn't ask you because you'd already done enough, and she assumed I would be the next source. My father frowned. That wasn't fair of her. I shrugged. It's not about fair. It's about expectation. She expected me to give without question, just like you've always expected me to be fine with being forgotten. My mother reached for her cup of coffee, hands trembling slightly. We didn't realize. She whispered, we should have. But we didn't, for the first time. I saw something real in her expression. Not shame exactly, but a crack in the surface, a place where truth had finally started to leak through. I'm not angry, I said. And it was mostly true. I'm just done. Done pretending we're closer than we are. Done hoping things will change without effort. Done being the strong one because no one else wants to be. When we stood up to leave, my father hesitated, then offered a hug. I didn't take it, not out of cruelty, but because I wasn't ready. My mother asked if we could meet again, maybe lunch in a few weeks. That depends, I said, on whether it's about me, not Emma, not Tile, not turkey dinners, me. She nodded. I think she meant it. Maybe. I walked back to my car with a strange stillness inside me. Not relief, not triumph, just space. The kind of space you only feel after removing something heavy you didn't know you'd been carrying. I didn't check my phone. I didn't replay the conversation in my head. I just drove home with the windows down, letting cold air fill my lungs like oxygen after a long dive. And in that quiet, I realized this wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning of me not being erased. After that conversation at the cafe, something inside me stopped needing to be heard by them. Not because they finally understood or apologized in a way that healed anything, but because I had spoken the truth out loud, and that was enough. I didn't replay the words later or wait for follow-up texts. I didn't sit by the phone hoping for a gesture that would make it all feel different. I had done what I needed to do, and now it was time to move forward without dragging the weight of their silence behind me. That weekend, I met with the lawyer Michael had recommended. We went through every layer of the prize taxes, investments, trusts, protections. The process was long, clinical, and exhausting, but it gave me something I hadn't felt in years: control, not over people or outcomes, but over my own decisions, my time, my peace. That kind of power was quiet and sharp, and I knew I had to use it well. Instead of making one grand announcement or buying a mansion on a cliff, I signed a lease on a temporary furnished place near the university district. Nothing flashy, just somewhere no one knew me and I could breathe while sorting out the next phase. I kept my name off the mailbox. I forwarded all mail to a P.O. box and changed my phone number. My old number stayed active, but was now routed through a service that filtered every call. Vanessa left 8 voicemails in 4 days. My mother left 2. My father sent a single message that read, "We need to talk about planning." I didn't answer any of them. I wasn't being cruel. I was protecting the quiet I had just found. And for once, I didn't feel guilty about it. I also didn't rush into quitting my job, despite Michael urging me to. Instead, I requested a 3-month leave under personal development. It was approved with a short email and no follow-up call, which told me all I needed to know about my role there. I used that time to write down the idea I'd been carrying for years, the one I never had time or energy to pursue while debugging other people's broken code, a foundation that would fund computer science education for young women from underfunded public schools. I didn't want to reward perfection or polish. I wanted to back girls who reminded me of who I was at 16, the one solving problems no one saw, waiting for someone to believe in them. Michael helped me sketch out the operations. We found a program manager. We consulted with education nonprofits. I spent hours on the phone with school counselors, asking what they needed but rarely received. The clarity came fast, not just because I had money, but because I had finally stopped waiting for permission to make something meaningful. Every dollar that left my account felt cleaner than anything I'd earned writing back-end for a fintech app no one cared about. It wasn't about charity, it was about legacy, even if my own family never recognized the one I had already built. Then, almost 3 weeks after the press release, Vanessa showed up at my old apartment. The building manager called me after she'd spent 15 minutes buzzing all the other tenants and yelling into the intercom when no one let her in. She sat on the front steps, loudly complaining to anyone who passed that her sister had gone insane after winning the lottery and was cutting everyone out like some dramatic diva. I wasn't surprised. I was disappointed, but not shocked. That had always been her way. Push until someone told her no, then scream until they said yes. Later that night, she sent a long email that started with, "I'm sorry you feel like I've taken you for granted," and ended with a line about how the mold in the new place is really serious, and Mom and Dad have already done so much. I didn't respond. I didn't even finish reading it. I forwarded it to Michael, who texted back, "You made the right call. I knew I had, and that knowing was worth more than any apology she could have faked." I had changed, but not in the ways they feared. I wasn't hardened or spiteful or unreachable. I was simply no longer willing to trade pieces of myself for the hope that someone might finally see me. That hope had been folded up and thrown away with the ticket stub and the empty gift bag, and in its place was something steadier. I had finally learned how to live without being needed by people who only looked for me when they ran out of other options. The first scholarship was awarded quietly, through a local community newsletter and a short email to the school principal. It wasn't a big press event or a promotional video, just a message to one girl, a 10th grader named Liana, who had built her own website from scratch and maintained it on a borrowed Chromebook while working weekends at her aunt's food truck. She didn't have perfect grades, didn't have the language to talk about her potential in big, rehearsed words, but she showed up. She created. She persisted. And I knew from one phone call with her school counselor that she had no idea what she was capable of yet. The scholarship didn't promise a fancy dorm or 4 years of luxury. It promised no debt, a laptop, room to think, a start. By the time we had launched the full foundation program, I had received more than 60 applications from students across the county. Most were girls. Some were first generation. Some were barely passing because they were translating homework for their parents at night. Every one of them had one thing in common. They weren't waiting to be rescued. They were surviving, waiting to be noticed, and I could finally do something about that, quietly, without anyone else's approval, without asking for space at a table that had never made room for me to begin with. Michael helped me set up the advisory board. Mostly women in tech who had walked similar paths. Some were older, some younger, but all of them had stories like mine, rooms they weren't invited into, work that was praised when repeated by louder voices, a lifetime of being described as competent while watching others be called brilliant. We didn't want to build another elite gatekeeping system. We wanted to build ladders, steady, quiet ladders for girls no one clapped for yet. Meanwhile, my family stayed mostly silent. After Vanessa's last email, she seemed to retreat into social media. I only knew because someone forwarded me a screenshot from her Instagram story where she posted a quote about money changing people. With a caption about letting go of toxic ties, I didn't respond. I didn't care. For the first time in my life, her disapproval meant nothing. And that was a kind of freedom I hadn't known I was missing. My parents, for their part, tried a different approach. My mother sent a handwritten letter. It wasn't long or overly sentimental, just a page that said she was trying to understand, that she had realized how much she had overlooked, and that she wanted to be better. My father added a postscript that simply said, "I should have seen you more clearly." I sat with that letter for 3 days before replying, not with anger, not with distance, just with honesty. I told them that I was not interested in repairing anything that required me to shrink again. If they wanted a relationship, it would be built in the present, not edited from the past. I wasn't going to pretend I hadn't been hurt just to make them comfortable. That was the condition. And for now, that was enough. On the 1-year anniversary of the lottery win, I invited Michael and 2 other close friends to dinner at my apartment. Nothing fancy, just takeout, a bottle of wine, and quiet music playing from the speaker in the corner. After dessert, Michael raised a glass and said, "To Julia, who didn't change, but finally decided she didn't need to explain herself to anyone." It made me smile, not because I needed validation, but because someone had seen it. Someone had understood that all this, the foundation, the new apartment, the distance from my family wasn't about revenge. It was about returning to myself. Later that night, when everyone had gone and Ajax had curled up at my feet, I stood by the window and looked out over the city. Same buildings, same streetlights, but I was not the same. I wasn't the invisible one anymore. I wasn't the strong one by default. I was someone who had learned, after years of being forgotten. That visibility doesn't always come from being chosen. Sometimes it comes from choosing yourself, even when no one claps. 3 months after the scholarship fund officially launched, my mother reached out again. This time, her message was different. There was no list of things she wanted to explain, no request for updates or forgiveness, just a quiet sentence. "Your father and I would like to have dinner with you. Just us. No expectations, no agenda." I read the message 3 times before deciding to reply. We picked a small Italian place near the water, one they used to love when I was younger. I chose it partly because I knew they'd feel familiar there, and partly because it wasn't anyone's home. There'd be no distractions, no old pictures hanging on the walls, no background noise of a sister's voice taking up the air. I arrived 10 minutes early and asked for a table by the window. It was a cold evening, but the glass fogged with warmth from the kitchen. My parents walked in together, my mother in a soft gray coat, my father slightly hunched, his hands stuffed into his jacket pockets. They looked older than I remembered. Not dramatically, just subtly smaller, less like the people I had tried so long to impress, and more like people simply trying to do their best with tools they never upgraded. We ordered dinner without ceremony. No champagne, no toasts, just 3 bowls of pasta and water with lemon. There was awkwardness at first, but it wasn't hostile. It was the kind that forms when people know they've disappointed someone and can't quite find the shape of an apology big enough to cover the years. My mother was the first to break the silence. "We've been thinking a lot about what you said that day," she began, not looking directly at me, "about how we made you feel." I didn't answer right away. I let her continue. "It wasn't right, Julia. It never was. We can't change the way we raised you, but we're starting to understand how unfair it was to expect you to carry yourself while constantly lifting others." My father nodded. We thought giving more to Vanessa meant balancing the scales. "But what we did was erase you." His voice didn't shake, but there was something in his expression I had never seen before, humility without shame. He wasn't performing. He was simply admitting. I took a breath, measured and steady. "I don't want apologies," I said. "Not because they don't matter, but because they can't rewrite what's already done. What I want is clarity going forward. No pretending. No rewriting history." My mother nodded. Slowly. "We understand." I told them about the foundation. I told them about the students, the board, the applications I read every week. I didn't brag. I wasn't fishing for pride. I just wanted them to know what I had built in the silence their neglect had created. My mother listened carefully, and my father asked a few questions. But the best part was that, for once, no one interrupted. They didn't make it about them. They didn't mention Vanessa once. That silence was the closest they'd ever come to respect. After the check arrived, my mother reached into her purse and handed me a small box. "I know gifts aren't the point," she said quietly. "But this belonged to your grandmother. I always meant to give it to you." I opened the box slowly. Inside was a silver locket, simple and worn, the clasp a little loose. I remembered it from years ago, buried in her drawer, never spoken of. I closed it gently and slid it into my coat pocket. "Thank you," I said, and I meant it, not because of the gift, but because she hadn't tried to wrap it in sentiment. She had just handed it over, finally letting go of something she shouldn't have kept for so long. We parted with a quiet goodbye. No hugs, no plans, just mutual understanding. And that was enough. On the way home, I didn't feel hollow or elated. I felt rooted, like I had walked into something difficult and walked out whole. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a glass of wine and the soft hum of Ajax snoring at my feet. My phone buzzed, and for a moment I hesitated before checking it. But it wasn't Vanessa. It was Leanna, the scholarship student, sending a photo of her new laptop and a thank you note scrawled in black ink. "No one's ever invested in me before." She wrote, "I'll make it count," and I believed her. The call came on a Wednesday morning just after 9. It was Vanessa. Her name lit up my phone screen like a memory I no longer owed anything to. I didn't answer right away. I let it ring, watched the screen go dark, then light up again with a voicemail alert. I waited 2 more hours before playing it. Her voice was tight, clipped, not angry, but not soft either. "Hey, Julia, I know it's been a while. I heard about the fund, and, well, I guess I need to ask you something. Can we talk?" I sat with it for a full day. I didn't feel triggered, or shaken, or even curious, just calm, like someone reading the final page of a book they already understood. When I called her back the next morning, she picked up immediately. "Julia," she said, like she was surprised I had called. I didn't say much at first, just listened. She explained that the house our parents had gifted her had been sold in a rush. The market had shifted, and she had overextended herself with renovations. The money was gone. She wasn't homeless, but she was scrambling. "I'm not asking for anything," she added. "Just, I don't know." I needed to say that out loud. I didn't lecture her. I didn't remind her of her words from that day at the kitchen table or the way she made me feel like the help. I told her I hoped she'd land on her feet. That was it. No venom, no coldness, just truth. The silence on the other end of the line stretched, but she didn't feel it, I think, in her own way. She understood that the conversation wasn't really about her needs anymore. It was about what I was no longer willing to carry. Later that week, a journalist from a local magazine requested an interview about the Scholarship Foundation. She wanted a story arc, humble beginnings, family drama, lottery ticket twist, all wrapped in a bow. I declined, not because I wasn't proud, but because the real story couldn't be flattened into clickbait. The truth wasn't that a lottery win had saved me. It was that, for the first time, I had stopped waiting for someone else to choose me and built something from that space. That isn't viral, but it's real. A few weeks later, on a quiet Sunday, I visited my old neighborhood. I parked across from the community center where we'd hosted free coding workshops for girls every other Saturday. As I watched a new class walk in, some of them wide-eyed, some of them skeptical, I realized something that took years to fully land. I was never missing. I was never invisible. I was simply surrounded by people who refused to see me clearly. Once I stepped out of that lens, the world didn't magically change, but I did. That evening, I took out the locket my mother had given me and opened it. Inside was a tiny folded photo of my grandmother, a woman I barely remembered, but whose strength I felt more clearly the older I became. I added a note of my own to the other side, just a line. "You were not wrong to want more." I closed it and put it back in the drawer. Not everything needs to be worn. Some things are just for remembering. The night ended with the city outside my window glowing faintly, the hum of a train passing in the distance. Ajax stretched on the rug, eyes half closed, content. I poured a glass of water, turned off the light, and sat for a moment in the dark, letting the silence settle without discomfort. I had no more speeches to give, no final blow to deliver, no spotlight to claim, just peace, earned, not handed, not dramatic, not public, just mine. In the end, the real twist wasn't the lottery or the silence from my sister or the late apology from my parents. It was how quietly dignity can return when you stop needing permission to have it. Have you ever realized that walking away wasn't weakness, but the most powerful choice you could have made?